right, I think that's going to do it for us. So let's get started. Welcome to this Public Information Center. I'm Mira Schenker, a member of the communications team at Waterfront Toronto. Just go ahead and type into the chat if you can't hear me or you're having any trouble seeing the screen as we get started and move through some housekeeping at the beginning of this meeting. We have staff here who can troubleshoot with you. I'm joined actually by several members of our project team at Waterfront Toronto, as well as some of our colleagues at the city who are working closely with on this project. Presenting today is myself, our Senior Vice President of Project Delivery, Julius Gambos, and Don McKinnon with Dillon Consulting. As I mentioned, there are lots of other members of our team here. You can't necessarily see them all, and we can't see you all. We know that these virtual meetings are getting old. We don't love it either. But hopefully we can still answer some of your questions today, despite the format. We hope that we will be able to. Before we get to that, I'd like to start the meeting by acknowledging that the land upon which Waterfront Toronto is undertaking our revitalization is part of the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. In addition, Toronto has historically been a gathering place for many Indigenous peoples, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people today. So for anyone who's not familiar, as we get started with the Microsoft Teams platform, at this point, I'm guessing a lot of you have joined other meetings through this platform. You can use the controls that you see here up on the screen to open the chat function. We're going to be using the chat primarily to communicate with everyone through this meeting, just because there's quite a lot of people on the meeting, and for that reason we've had to disable microphones to avoid a bit of a chaotic meeting. You can type your question to the chat at any point during this presentation, and we will either address it in the chat, we've got a few staff members there, or we'll save it for the Q&A session at the end of our presentation, where we'll have some of our project team members available to answer your questions. Next slide, please. Also, it might be helpful to know that the three dots there on your control panel are where you want to go if you want your screen to be bigger. If you're having trouble seeing the presentation, click on the dots, and on the drop-down menu, you should see focus and then full screen. Next slide, please. So here's what we'll be covering today. We're going to zoom out a little bit and give a quick big picture view of the overall area that we're talking about. We're then going to do a quick overview of our Portlands Flood Protection Project for anyone who's not familiar with that project, which is already 3 years into construction in the Portlands. Then we'll do a project overview of the Lake Shore Boulevard East project and a construction update on that same project, including the removal of the eastern ramps of the Gardiner Expressway. We'll give an upcoming construction overview for what's coming on Lake Shore Boulevard East, east of Don Roadway. We'll talk about the closures and road and cycling detours that entails. And then we'll get into some of the feedback we heard over the last couple of weeks of construction as we were working on the Gardiner Expressway, what we've done to address that. And then finally, some next steps and our Q&A session where we'll answer any of the questions that went into the chat. So I'm going to ask Don to get us started in our presentation with the future plans section here.
Sure, thanks, Myra. I just quickly turn on my camera so people can see I'm a real person, and then just to save some bandwidth, I'll turn it off. So starting with the big picture future plans, next slide, please. So this map image shows sort of the major developments that are will be occurring in the study area within the Portlands. Obviously, the largest project is the Portlands projects, highlighted in sort of the lighter blue turquoise color. Encompassed in that is Villiers Island, and then to the north, the Keating Channel Precinct, and then the Gardiner East project as it ties into the Keating Channel Precinct area. And then I'll speak to all of these developments in a bit more detail in a minute. In addition to these projects largely being led by Waterfront Toronto and the City of Toronto, are private developments, including the Unilever site and then the transformation of south of eastern area that lies on the north side of Lake Shore Boulevard East. Next slide. So starting with Villiers Island, Villiers Island is possible because of the Portlands project and the flood control benefits that will be realized from that project. It lies south of the existing Keating Channel, and its southern limits will be the new channel created by the Portlands project, the new Don River channel that's shown in this image. The development is largely residential, of which 20% will be allocated for affordable housing, plus a generous amount of green space that's tied in with the waterfront along the Toronto Harbour on the west side, as well as the south side of Villiers Island, and it ties in with the green space along the new river channel. Next slide. The Gardiner East project, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the project. It's part of a larger program to rehabilitate the entire Gardiner Expressway that the City of Toronto is undertaking. The focus as it relates to the Portlands area is the section that lies to the east of Cherry Street, so highlighted in red shows the new proposed alignment for the elevated section of the Gardiner to tie in with the DVP, and then the blue is showing the new realigned Lake Shore Boulevard East section. And again, both the Gardiner and Lake Shore Boulevard are being relocated further north away from the existing Keating Channel. Next slide. So tied in with the Gardiner is the Keating Channel precinct. Again, these are the lands that lie between the Keating Channel in the south, and then the rail yard, the Metrolinx rail yard in the north. In 2010, a Keating Channel precinct plan was released. It includes future development for mixed use, including both employment lands and residential. The key point here is that with the transformation of the Gardiner and other projects, that there is a need to update the Keating Channel precinct plan to make it consistent with these infrastructure changes. There was some visioning, if you will, of development in the Keating Channel precinct area as part of the Gardiner EA, but those plans definitely need to be confirmed, and that the City of Toronto will be undertaking an exercise to update the plan for this precinct. Next slide, please. So then zeroing a little bit on some of the key projects, starting with the Portlands Flood Protection Project. Next slide. So this image map shows or highlights the focus of the Portlands Flood Protection Project, which is the light blue area. So again, lying south of the rail tracks, north of the ship channel, to the west of Don Roadway, and then to the east of the Toronto Harbour. So that's really the focus of the Portlands project. And again, a key focus of these works is to alleviate flooding problems in the Lower Don area, and to allow new development in this area. So next slide. So this slide is showing what was recently the sort of the current condition of the Portlands area, highlighting the street network, Commissioners Villiers being the major streets for east-west, and Cherry, Munition, Don Roadway for the north-south streets, and the existing Keating Channel, which is at this point sort of the major outlet for the Don River. And next slide. And this slide shows what the transformation of the area will be by 2024, showing the second outlet, the new channel for the Don River that will extend through the Portlands, and then the creation of new green space along the new river channel, as well as green space along Toronto Harbor, and then obviously the area just lying to the north that I spoke to earlier, the Villiers Island area that will also be redeveloped. Next slide. So then moving on to Lake Shore Boulevard East. Next slide. So as indicated earlier, the City of Toronto is embarking on a long-term rehabilitation program for the entire stretch of the Gardiner Expressway, extending all the way over to Highway 427 in the west, to the Don River in the east, which again is the focus of our works that are currently ongoing. Most recently has been the rehabilitation of the Jarvis to Cherry section. And then with that will be the continuation of the Gardiner East project, which is the realignment of the Gardiner between Cherry and the Don Valley Parkway, which is to occur in the 2026 to 2030 period. Next slide. So talking a little bit about the Gardiner Expressway project. This project was commenced as an individual environmental assessment in 2009, focused on the most eastern section of the Gardiner Expressway, so extending from Lower Jarvis over to its eastern terminus. Next slide. So a preferred alternative or option was developed through the Gardiner Expressway East EA. This environmental assessment received approval both by City Council and the Province of Ontario, as it was an individual environmental assessment. And the key components to this project include the maintenance of the overhead Gardiner Expressway between Jarvis to Cherry, but improvements to Lake Shore Boulevard and public realm pathways that lie beneath this elevated section. Then the removal of the existing Gardiner DVB connection that runs along the north side of the Keating Channel, and relocating Gardiner further north. So again, the section between Cherry and the DVP, along with the realignment of the overhead Gardiner, is a realignment of Lake Shore Boulevard East. So again, running between Cherry and the Don River crossing. And then east of the Don River is a removal of the overhead expressway, or what's known as the Logan ramps, that formerly touched down to Lake Shore Boulevard. So those have now been removed. And then the reconfiguration of Lake Shore Boulevard east of the river. So prior to the removal of the overhead Gardiner, Lake Shore Boulevard was split between eastbound lanes and westbound lanes. With this project, that Lake Shore Boulevard east of Don River will now be, those lanes are being brought together in a more conventional arrangement. Next slide. This is an image showing, or a rendering showing, what the Keating Channel precinct could look like with the realigned Gardiner between Cherry and the DVP. So it shows the Gardiner, the new Lake Shore Boulevard, so tying in at the Lake Shore Bridge in its current location, and then Cherry Street, and then the potential for our vision of new development that could occur in this area between the Keating Channel, the new realigned Lake Shore, and Cherry Street to the west. Next slide. So in terms of what's happening now, we kind of talked about the big picture, long-term vision for the area. We're now going to zero in a bit more on what is happening now. So Waterfront Toronto is now embarked on the implementation of some elements of the Gardiner East project, as well as the Portland's Flood Protection Project. And this project has three main components. First, it includes a rebuild of the Lake Shore Bridge over the Don River, the removal of the Gardiner on-off ramps, or the Logan ramps, which is now has happened, and then the rebuilding of Lake Shore Boulevard over the new bridge, and then extending east over to Carlaw. So next slide. So why are these projects being combined? So the slide or the image shows the sort of the two projects, the focus of the flood protection project and the bridge over the river, and then Lake Shore Boulevard to the east of the river. So the main reasons for combining these projects and implementing them together is first, results in a lower cost. It would also result in 2 years less of traffic disruption. So instead of going in and rebuilding the bridge for flood conveyance reasons and then going back in the future for the transportation reasons, it's all being done at one time, which will result in a less amount of traffic disturbance. Thirdly, it's safer, a much safer construction process if those overhead ramps are removed in advance of the reconstruction of the Lake Shore Boulevard Bridge. And then finally, advancing the Lake Shore East section of the project results in new pathways, pedestrian cycle pathways, and public realm space, green space being realized along Lake Shore Boulevard East 4 years earlier had the projects been separated. Next slide. So to talk a little bit more about the bridge project and what it entails, there's really two components to it. So this slide, the image on the left is showing sort of an existing condition. The drawing on the right shows the future condition, including the sediment debris management area, which is the gray area that will be sitting on the west bank of the Don River that's associated with the larger Portland Flood Protection Project. So the first component of the bridge project is to essentially lengthen the bridge. So lengthening it in an east-west direction and creation of new bays. And that's to improve river conveyance to flow under the bridge during flood conditions. Oh. There. So that's the lengthening component of the bridge or of the project, to again focused on flood reduction and improving river conveyance. So next slide. And the second part of the project is really for transportation reasons, and it involves what we're referring to as a widening of the bridge, and that's to allow for more space on the bridge deck to allow for pedestrian and cycle movement, as well as improvements related to traffic flow. So again, the bridge is being lengthened and the bridge is being widened. So to do that, essentially it involves an extension of Lake Shore Bridge and adjacent rail bridge by 2 spans, so the lengthening, to relocate utilities from the existing rail bridge, and the replacement of the Lake Shore Bridge and the rehabilitation of the existing piers and abutments. Next slide. So how are we changing Lake Shore Boulevard East? So this is the section of Lake Shore Boulevard from the Don River over. These changes are being guided by 2 documents. First is the Gardiner East Environmental Assessment that presented a conceptual design for Lake Shore Boulevard. And then secondly, the subsequent Lake Shore Boulevard East Public Realm Plan that was developed to further advance the design for Lake Shore Boulevard from Jarvis Street over. So this Public Realm Plan is a vision for about 3 kilometers of Lake Shore Boulevard, and it develops in more detail the plan for the roadway, for public realm space, for green space, as well as active transportation facilities throughout the entire corridor. This stage of the project includes the realignment of Lake Shore Boulevard from Don Roadway over to Carlaw Avenue. So even though for the most part Lake Shore Boulevard is being maintained within its existing right-of-way, with the removal of the Logan ramps, there is more space for the roadway, so there's some adjustments to the alignment of Lake Shore Boulevard through this space. New pedestrian and cycling facilities and landscaping on the Lake Shore Bridge and Lake Shore Boulevard from Don Roadway to Carlaw. And then the shifting of the existing rail tracks that sit on the north side of Lake Shore Boulevard, east of Don Roadway, to the center median of the new Lake Shore Boulevard. And then with the idea of connecting those tracks to the existing tracks at Carlaw, which are already in the middle of the roadway. Next slide. So this slide is a western view, a cross section of the new Lake Shore Boulevard. So starting on the left side, the south side of the roadway, multi-use trail for pedestrians, planted median, three lanes for eastbound traffic, the center median that could hold the rail tracks should they be ultimately relocated to the median, and then 3 westbound lanes, planted median, multi-directional cycle path, more plantings, and then the pedestrian walkway, and then more plantings. Next slide, please. So the end result of the project is flood protection for Portlands that will facilitate new development in the Portlands area, creating new space to move people in cars, on bike, on foot, including a new multi-use trail along the north side of Lake Shore Boulevard, and improve public spaces and connections to existing space in the waterfront area. And next slide. So I think at this point, we're going to invite Julius from Waterfront Toronto to provide an update on the Portlands construction.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So we're going to have a little drone footage over the site. This is quite recent. We're looking over the river here. This is the new Cherry Street Bridge foundation that you're seeing in the Polson Slip. The crane is off to the left. We're just starting work now on the dock wall on the left side of the slip. This will be becoming Canoe Cove, where we'll be setting up smaller islands and public access to the water. We're now moving along the face of the dock wall where MT35 used to be. We're doing dock wall repairs right now, modifying tiebacks and stabilizing the dock wall. This is the fish habitat, and we've had great success with this, with species coming back into the harbor. This is the lake fill area that was completed early in the project. Now we're moving down the heating channel. This is the other cove that was created for fish habitat. This is the new Cherry Street Transit Bridge. We're expecting another bridge for this location for vehicles next spring. The old Cherry Street Bridge will be removed and the heating channel widened in this area. You can see the Gardiner demolition in the distance here. We'll get closer. To the left, you can see where the sediment management area is going to be, which is beyond the curves of the ramp down to the river level. Now you can start to see the extent of the removal of the ramps. So we've removed, well, since this has been taken, the bents have also been removed. Sediment management area I referred to earlier doesn't quite come back this far, but it's in this area. Logan ramps are shown here as now removed. Since this image was taken, the bents are gone and the balance of the ramp structure is gone. This is the Don Roadway. And we have the ice management area here at the bottom left. This will be the river moving south. The bridge is being moved into place here. Where the large mounds are, this is what we call the elbow. Straight ahead is the Don Greenway spillway, and then you turn back to the river where we started. You can see that the river profile has taken shape now, as is the spillway. We've excavated about 700,000 cubic meters of soil and treated it. We still have another 700,000 to go. You can see that the river structure is continuing. So they're putting in timber along the perimeter again to support fish habitat and structure. We're putting in foundations for pedestrian bridges, and now circle back to the new river mouth that'll come out through the Polson Slip. And ahead of us to the right is the Cherry Street Lakefill. Thank you. Next. So, shall I handle this one?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. This is an overview of project activity, so you can see the extent of the demolition. I point out again at the bottom, you can see where there are 2 bents over the river, and we'll be taking 2 more over, moving towards the left, for a total of 4 for that increased area, and we'll be excavating in the sediment management area to open the river mouth of the same width, and that'll carry through to the shape of the new river. So we've closed the Gardiner ramp and got on with demolition quickly. The removals have been completed. Lake Shore Bridge work will commence in November and continue through till January 2024. The Lake Shore Carlaw work, so extending off to the east to Carlaw, will continue until December 24th, noting that the flood protection project overall will be completed by March 2024. Next. This was an image just as we started the first day of demolition. There were 8 rigs involved overhead, along with equipment below the ramps to control spillage. You can see the large plates were held up by mechanized equipment to keep containment of the material as it dropped. This went very, very quickly, so we congratulate our contractor, Elliston, and their subtrade, Priestley, for getting this done quickly and efficiently. Next. So this was when the steel was being pulled down. Bents were still up in place. We're now looking down the Keating Channel. Again, this was work that went on day and night over those weekends. Next. And again, looking to the west, you see some of the bents in the structure just prior to demolition. We've lost the image and back. Now this is looking along Lake Shore again, and you can see the center section of the ramps gone. So that's a fair bit of real estate that we've gained, which will accommodate new design, new structure, new bicycle paths and walkways, and landscaping along Lake Shore Road, and we'll be increasing lanes. Next.
Great. Thanks, Julius.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll jump back in here. Next slide, please. So the next set of slides, we're going to focus on what's going to happen over the next few months and years as the construction continues on the project. So in terms of Lake Shore Boulevard, in terms of what to expect, there will be lane restrictions starting this month and continuing to 2024. So we're looking at about a 3.5-year construction period. These include lane restrictions will be in place on Lake Shore Boulevard between Carlaw and Cherry Street. Mid-October to December of 2021, there'll be 1 lane in each direction on Lake Shore Boulevard at Cherry Street intersection. And then December 2021 to 2024, there will be a maintenance, or will maintain on Lake Shore Boulevard 2 eastbound lanes and 1 westbound lane between Don Roadway and Carlaw Avenue. In addition, the number of intersection traffic control measures that will be put in place, including lanes will be marked using traffic barrels and signage. Traffic control will be done by paid duty officers at intersections while the construction work is occurring. As well, there'll be flag persons present to control construction vehicle movement when crossing public spaces such as roads, sidewalks, bike paths, etc. The other important point is realize that it's expected that the construction management plan will evolve. Changes will be made as required to reduce disruption based on feedback that we received from the public. So it's very much, although there is a plan in place, there is an expectation that that plan will continue to be revised and tweaked to minimize impact as much as possible. And just noting the email address to for those interested in signing up to receive ongoing information about the construction. Next slide. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about the road closures and detours, including for cycling and pedestrian facilities. Next slide. So starting with November 2021 to August 2022 for road closures. Next slide. So here we have is an image of showing sort of the intersection area of the DVP and Lake Shore Boulevards for the focus of the construction. So starting with item 1, and again, the dot line is showing where there'll be lane restrictions. The dash red line is road closures, and then the blue line will be roadways that will be remain open. So starting with item 1, as I indicated earlier, Lake Shore Boulevard between Cherry and Carlaw will be reduced to 2 eastbound lanes and 1 westbound lane. Then item 2, over to the Cherry Street, Lake Shore Boulevard intersection, that there will be lane restrictions at the Cherry Street intersection, which may be down to 1 lane in each direction in mid-October. And then noting item 3 as a partial opening of the new Cherry Street, the new realigned Cherry Street as of May 2022. Next slide, please. Okay, now moving on to closures and detours for cycling and pedestrian facilities. Next slide. So this slide highlighting those detours until October 31st. And so two real points, and this is an adjustment really of the original plan that was previously presented. This includes the delay of the closure and the removal of the cycle pedestrian bridge over the Don River until October 31st, until the end of this month. And similarly, the trail along the north side trail along Lake Shore Boulevard East will also remain open until the end of October. Next slide. And then for the period of November 21 to January 22. So item 1, noting the various closures, including the lower Don Trail south of the Don Rail Yard, the cycling pedestrian bridge over the Don River, and the multi-use trail on Lake Shore Boulevard between Don Roadway and Booth will be closed. And then item 2, back over to the Cherry Street intersection, new crossing of Lake Shore in progress. Crossing will continue at the existing crossing. And then item 3, again, sort of highlighting the closure of the trail from Don Roadway over to Booth. And then that section from Booth, sorry, the bottom is kind of covered up on my image. The section of Booth over to Carlaw that closure will occur, or sorry, that section would be open until the end of November. Next slide, please. And then from January 22 to May 22, noting that the new crossing at Cherry Street, the new crossing of Lake Shore, will be open by this point. And then also noting on this slide the detours. So the next set of slides, we're talking about the pedestrian cycle detours through the area. The sort of the blue toned area highlights the detour around the closures of Lake Shore Boulevard East over the river, which will involve a combination of Carlaw, Commissioners, Salter, Villiers, and then Cherry Street back up to Lake Shore Boulevard. Next slide. So these slides are going to focus, each slide focuses on a different section of that detour and speaking to what is currently in place, as well as what is planned to be in place in regarding to the detours for cyclists and pedestrians. So starting with Carlaw, so the section that extends between Lake Shore in the north and Commissioners in the south. The new current facility includes a new multi-use trail on the east side of Carlaw, and that's shown in the image here. Next slide. And then continuing, I guess, west along Commissioners. So currently it includes a unidirectional bike lane on either side of the road, so on the north side and the south side of the roadway, separated by a concrete jersey barrier between Carlaw and Bouchette, and then as well, separated by traffic barrels between Bouchette and Salter. Now, some of these barrels will be replaced in the near term with the concrete barriers. Next slide. And then now moving on to Salter Street. So the current facility includes a bi-directional cycle tract on the west side of Salter, separated by traffic barriers that are connected with the K-bars. So you can see that in the image. And then noting that the cycle path has been recently repaved. And then the planned facility will include separated by, so the replacement of the traffic barrels with a concrete jersey barrier, and then also a new sidewalk on the west side of the roadway. And that these, the design for these changes, just noting that these are still under review. Next slide. And then now on Villiers Street, currently includes a unidirectional bike path or bike lane on either side of the road, currently separated by concrete jersey barriers and traffic barrels connected with K-bar. The planned facility will include the traffic barrels and K-bar to be replaced by concrete curbs and bollards, which is also the concrete curbs is showing on the right side image. Next slide. And then ending with Cherry Street, providing connection back up to Lake Shore Boulevard. So current facility includes a bidirectional multi-use trail on the west side of Cherry Street. And then the plan facility after the Cherry Street realignment will include a bidirectional multi-use trail on the west side of the new alignment of Cherry Street. And then next slide. So I think at this point, Mara from WT is going to talk about what we've heard to date and the feedback to some of the key comments that we've received.
I am. Thanks, Don. So for those who don't receive our weekly traffic notices that we've been emailing digitally, I'm going to make sure that we put a link in the chat at some point so that you can sign up. What we've been doing week to week, especially during the weekend closures of Lake Shore Boulevard, where we know there's been a significant impact on vehicular and cycling traffic, is doing a roundup of some of the key issues we've heard, whether you've called us, emailed us, tweeted at us, and some of the things that the team is doing to adjust the traffic management plan where we can. to hopefully alleviate some of that pressure, not eliminate it. So next slide, we'll go through a couple of these. It's not exhaustive by any means, but these are some of the things we heard most. So this slide just speaks to what I was just saying, which is that we've had 5 weekends of construction with closures on Lake Shore, which meant detours for drivers and cyclists, and also pedestrians who might have been using the Lower Don Trail. And this is a major transportation network, so we know that when you close it down, you see a ripple effect. That's why we've done the extensive traffic studies and modeling that we did. But even so, of course, we're gonna see how the impact plays out in real life, and we need to listen to the feedback that we're hearing from people who are trying to navigate through these areas. There's also a lot of other construction in the area, which we're aware of, right? So in addition to the work that we're doing, there's other work going on that compounds it, and we can appreciate a lot of us move through that area day to day as well. We appreciate that it's a difficult situation. So what have we been hearing and what have we been doing? Next slide. So of course, increased travel times and congestion, and we have a traffic management plan, of course, in place. Some of the stuff that we're already doing, we had removed parking along the detour routes during the weekend closures to try to keep traffic moving. During our traffic study, we reviewed in coordination with the City of Toronto 70 plus intersections, and we made adjustments at 18 so that we could help traffic flow in the areas we'd identified as pain points. Since we heard more feedback once the work started, we also added a left turn restriction at Empire Avenue from Eastern Avenue on weekends, and we had traffic enforcement in place there to try and make sure that that was abided by. We also had a traffic control agent in collaboration with the City of Toronto stationed, sometimes more than one agent, stationed at the intersection of Jarvis and Lake Shore Boulevard to try to help manage some of that traffic moving onto the ramps, the Gardiner ramps there at Jarvis. Next slide. We also heard that concurrent projects and overlapping closures were causing a lot of congestion and issues for people and longer travel times. It is an unfortunate reality right now, especially in the East End with all the change that's happening, all of this really positive revitalization that, of course, in the short term is difficult to work through, that there was going to be other work in the area. There were some unanticipated closures due to some work that was going on a little bit longer than anticipated. One of those was Lake Shore Boulevard near Cherry Street. There was some work that Enbridge had to complete that extended into mid-October, so that was an overlapping closure with our work on Lake Shore and Gardiner. On that should be cleared up before we have to restart our work in November on Lake Shore Boulevard, but I do want to flag that there may also be some lane restrictions related to some of our work on Portland's flood protection in that same area. We'll come back in our digital traffic notices with the specifics of that if that closure actually has to be put in place. There were also some lane closures on Jarvis due to some work that the City of Toronto had to complete just north of Lake Shore. And that's also anticipated to be complete before we restart our work. So we're anticipating that when we get back to work on Lake Shore Boulevard, we won't have those overlapping closures. Next slide. We heard from people who are living on streets like Morse, Logan Avenue, Caroline Street, Empire Avenue, and Eastern, that there was speeding with people who were taking the detours and probably feeling a bit frustrated, illegal movements, people driving the wrong way, people turning in the wrong direction. So we did go back to the city's work zone coordination group and with their support requested some additional enforcement from the Toronto Police Service, which they were able to provide. In particular, we saw a big increase in enforcement on the last 2 weekends of work. They handed out, according to them, quite a few tickets. So I'll actually work with them now, get a sense of what they handed out tickets for, and see if there's anything we can do to address that behavior, whether it be better signage, more clear signage. We did make sure that all the signage, all the turning restriction signs and street direction signs were clearly visible. There were 1 or 2 places where we had to trim some foliage, for example. And as I mentioned already, we added that left turn restriction on each end. Next slide. We also heard that some people living in neighborhoods to the east of our work didn't know that this work was coming, in part because I think typically Waterfront Toronto's work has not extended that far east. So even though we placed ads, even though we took out radio spots, even though we put up signs, we don't have the best reach into those communities yet. We do have some representation on our construction liaison committee that meets regularly. And we speak to this later in the presentation, but I'll also say now that if you live in one of these communities and you'd like to get more involved, we'd love to hear from you. We want to make sure that we have those connections to your networks so that we can get the word out as effectively as possible. We did mail notices in advance of the first weekend of work, but what we started to do to respond to what we were hearing, which is that people were a bit confused about what was happening week to week, we distributed flyers on some of these local streets here, Carlaw, Morrison, Empire, on Fridays and Saturdays to give people the updated information week to week. We also ended up having the benefit of being able to talk with some people face to face, which is always better than email and online. So next slide. Noise. So of course the removal of the ramps from the Gardiner is going to cause noise. There was jackhammering on weekends. We have significantly more noise complaints on the first weekend than every weekend thereafter. And we think that's because after the first weekend, Elliston did some investigations and found that there was jackhammers were making contact with metal beams, which was causing more noise than it needed to. And so the contractor adjusted that and reduced the level of noise. But we know that people were still hearing noise on weekends, and we're happy to say that that's now complete. So that's some good news. Next slide. So we also heard and are still processing feedback from cyclists using those detours. We saw that even though we anticipated they would be ready in time for closures, not all of the physical separation on the detours with the jersey barriers and concrete curbs that were in the design was in place. There were barrels in place, which is typically an accepted city standard. But we also know that this is a high traffic area and that this is a big detour for cyclists on a significant route, the Lake Shore Boulevard Trail and the Lower Don Trail. So what we did was we worked with our construction manager to delay the removal of the pedestrian bridge over the Don River, that Lower Don Trail connection east-west, until the end of October to maintain the existing connection until all the components of the planned detour can be installed and can be fine-tuned. And when I say fine-tuned, we've received a good amount of feedback from people using the trail. We've collected it all, we've logged it all. We're working with the project team on our end, as well as our colleagues at the City of Toronto, to make sure that we are responding to all of the comments that we got. The update there on the detours themselves is that jersey barriers, those high concrete barriers, are in place everywhere planned in the design. There are barrels with bars in between them in place at some locations where we are waiting for concrete curbs, those lower concrete curbs, because the materials have not been available. We anticipate that when we need the detours in place again in November, all of those curbs are going to be in. All the painted markings are also complete now, and we're working to make sure that they don't get worn down. We'll make sure that street washing and wear and tear, especially as we move into winter, doesn't erode those markings. So that's a very high level summary of what's been going on. And if you've been back and forth with us or talking with us over email or Twitter, you may even have more details than this already. So next slide. So one of the main pieces of feedback we got was around wayfinding on the trails. There is a comprehensive signage plan that was developed in consultation with the city and approved. But as I said, the same thing with the traffic modeling. Once people start using these routes, the real world experience means that we're getting feedback that we need to take seriously. So we did. And based on the specific feedback we got from cyclists, here are some pictures of a couple of the locations where we added more wayfinding and signage. And there are a couple more places that we've been getting feedback on. So we'll take a look at that as well to make sure that we can guide people as clearly as possible. We also have about 35 information signs with maps on them at what we identified as kind of key decision points on the trail. So to try and get people the information before they, go too far down a route that's going to cause them to have to turn around, for example. It would be useful if people don't feel that those are helping, or if that they're, there's other information, let us know. Right now, those signs are going to be covered because we don't want people to think that the detours are currently in place. The detours are not in place anymore and won't be until the end of October. So we have a little bit of time. We have to make new signs anyways. We welcome your feedback if there's something about those signs that you felt wasn't particularly helpful. Next slide. We also had some feedback about intersections for cyclists, especially connections between the bi-directional trails, so trail east-west on one side of the street, and the unidirectional trails on the north and south side of the street. We followed up and installed bike signals at Carlaw and Lake Shore and commissioners and Carlaw. We also worked with the city to get traffic control agents in place during the weekend closures. I mentioned maintenance a bit earlier. We did hear that the lanes needed some more regular maintenance. We have now someone assigned, more than one person assigned full-time to monitor the detours during weekend closures. Although, as I said, the weekend closures are now not in play, but once the detour is in place again, that staff will return to monitor the detours. There is frequent road washing and sweeping. We have heard that that is actually maybe creating a bit of mud. We will look into what we can do, as well as looking into making sure that the quality of the road service and all the detours is where it needs to be. Next slide. We also heard early on that people felt there was a lacking connection to the Carlaw Avenue detour south of Lake Shore Boulevard for people riding south from Riverdale or from further north towards Lake Shore Boulevard. So what we did about that was the trail along Lake Shore Boulevard was kept open east of Booth Avenue and will continue to be open until November 30th. So that's to maintain that north-south connection from places like Riverside to the Lake Shore Trail and detour, while we consider a more permanent alternative. Next slide. So now we're moving into a couple of common questions, and then we'll have the start of our question and answer session. We thought we would proactively answer two of the more common questions that we get, especially from those who are not as familiar with the project as those who've been following it since, the early days of the environmental assessment several years back at this point. This question, though, is more about our traffic management plan. So I mentioned our traffic study and the modeling that was done. The modeling showed us, first of all, that the higher demand was eastbound traffic on Lake Shore. And so people want to know why the eastbound Gardiner on-ramp at Jarvis has been closed during construction. The answer to that, to try and distill it to a simple answer, is that closing the ramps eliminates the need for split signal timing for eastbound traffic on Lake Shore and Jarvis Street, which allows more eastbound traffic to move through the intersection. And based on what the modeling showed us, that would minimize the backup of cars on the Jarvis on-ramp and onto the Gardiner. The modeling showed us that only a small number of vehicles use the ramp during peak hours, peak as in busiest hours, usually in the morning and evening, to access the Don Valley Parkway, and that alternate routes had the capacity to accommodate that traffic. So that was the rationale for that decision as part of the traffic management plan. Next slide. And this is a bigger picture question, which is, will there be new on-off ramps to the Gardiner Expressway to replace the ramps to Logan Avenue that we've removed? Understandably a common question. So the long-term plan for those ramps is that they will be replaced with new ramps just east of Cherry Street. That's part of the City of Toronto's broader Gardiner East rehabilitation program. The section of the Gardiner that runs between Cherry Street and the DVP will be realigned further north of its current location as part of that approved design from the environmental assessment I was just mentioning, and that Dawn mentioned earlier. As the City of Toronto will build the new Cherry Street ramps off the realigned Gardiner Expressway, this needs to be built before the new ramps can be installed. And design for that section of the Gardiner is underway now, and the the estimated start of construction from the City of Toronto is 2026. We have a link to that project page for more information in our materials, and we can provide that in the chat as well. Removing the Logan ramps now, the ramps that we just removed, as opposed to waiting until that section further west is rebuilt, allowed for us to work much more safely and much more economically on rebuilding the Lake Shore Bridge over the Don River, which needs to happen now, needs to be lengthened, as Don mentioned. It also avoids a second round of construction on the Lake Shore Bridge a few years after our work will be finished in 2024. This way, we do all the work in that area of Lake Shore East now. We get the multi-use trail and separated bike facility and new green space and new lanes of traffic along Lake Shore in time for 2024. And then the city doesn't have to come back and do that work again in a couple of years and create another disruption in that location. So that's a big benefit. I believe that is the end of our presentation, and we're into our question and answer session. Oh no, my apologies. There's more. We just wanted to also check in on how we'll communicate moving forward to make sure that those who want to get the information about upcoming closures and detours can get it in a timely manner. During construction, we will make sure that there are clear road detour signs, information signs with details about how to find construction details or contact us should be in place before the construction begins, before detours are in play. Our traffic notices, as I mentioned, we sometimes mail them. We send much more frequent notices digitally. So again, if you'd like to sign up for those, you'll be able to receive them in your email. And we update the project website at this URL here regularly. So any new information that needs to be pushed out will be there. And we didn't mention it here on this list, but we also provide lots of updates in real time on our social media channels, primarily Twitter. So if you're following us on Twitter, you'll see our updates there. And finally, I mentioned earlier that we have a construction liaison committee. That's a committee that's made up of local residents, businesses, and groups like the cycling community and WalkDO, who are impacted by the work and can give us feedback in our regular meetings. They've got lots of details about the project that are presented to them at regular meetings. They also help us to circulate information to other people in their networks, right? So we really rely on the Construction Liaison Committee to reach out and connect with, their local neighborhood groups, the cycling communities that they may represent, for example. And so, again, if anyone is interested in participating within that and you feel that your community is not represented, please feel free to reach out to us. Next slide. This is the contact information that I won't walk through, but we're going to post this material on our project website after the meeting, so it's there for you if you're looking for it. Next slide. And actually, we have a couple of updates. Julius walked us through some construction updates earlier, showing the drone footage over the Portland's Flood Protection Project site. We just wanted to point to a few of the more exciting project milestones that are coming up. We mentioned already the realigned Cherry Street. Here on the slide, you can see in the yellow, you've got existing Cherry Street. At the top of the image is the Keating Channel, just to give you a bit of orientation, which is just south of Lake Shore Boulevard. So that's existing Cherry Street today. The new Cherry Street alignment is there in blue. And you can see a picture here of the new Cherry Street Bridge. Workers are preparing the bridge to pour the concrete deck. This bridge is already in, but doesn't have a deck yet. So they will be installing the forming and the rebar soon. And as we mentioned earlier, new Cherry Street from Poles to Commissioner Streets is scheduled to be open in August 2022, along with the new bridge that will be in the south part of the alignment over the New River Valley. Next slide. This is a close-up shot of what's happening in the Central River Valley. This is where excavation is complete and river finishes, like the rocks and aggregates that are going to make good fish habitat and are going to be a little planting zone for all of the greenery that's going in, is already complete. What they're doing here is, this is a bend in the river valley, and at these bends, you can get particularly aggressive fast waters in the event of a storm. So that fast waters rushing through. Trees, boulder, and other aggregates are intertwined here to provide erosion control and also fish habitat. Some of the trees actually came from the film set of The Expanse. That's a fun fact. They didn't need them anymore, and we thought, what a great way to repurpose these trees. It's much better use than, for example, mulch for these trees. The trees that you see here are ballasted down and anchored to each other with aggregate, which is small stone and sand that's placed in between the rock and stone. Slide. This is a shot of the two sections of the Commissioner Street Bridge, which arrived in two pieces, was barged over from the East Coast. The first half arrived in May, the second half arrived in late August. They're placed there, and they're being installed in the dry. The river will run under them. We just have not excavated it at this location yet. The next step is to weld the two halves of the bridges together. And that area gets heated to 250 degrees while they're welding. So another fun fact that I've been told is that the welders have to wear a special cooling suit, which we will take pictures of because it's pretty neat. Next slide. Just some links again that I won't walk through to some of the latest videos and information about the work on Portland's flood protection if you're interested in learning more or getting some more information. All right, next slide. Now it is the Q&A. Sorry that I preempted some of those more fun slides. So as promised, we'll have a question and answer period now. We have about 25 minutes left. And we have some members of the project team, as I mentioned, that are here to answer questions if I can't answer them. We have John McKee, who's a program manager with Collier's Waterfront Toronto. We have Rudy Suklal, our traffic consultant with Traffic Mobility, who worked on our traffic management plan with us. We have Ishan Garg, who's a project manager for bridges at Waterfront Toronto. And from the city's Waterfront Secretariat, we also have Christian Giles joining us. What I'm going to do is go through the questions that have already been typed into the chat. As I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we're using the chat function rather than audio just because we got quite a big group here joining us. So your mics aren't enabled. Type your questions into the chat. We'll answer them in the order that they came in, starting with questions that came in that weren't answered yet during the presentation. The only questions we won't answer are exact duplicates. So if two people have asked the same question, we're just going to answer it once, obviously. Otherwise, we'll go in order. We'll get through as many as we can. And if we run out of time, we will commit to following up in the meeting summary, which will be available on the project website and can also be emailed to those of you who registered. We'll also post the recording from this Q&A session along with the summary of the questions and answers. So let's get started with some of the questions that came in earlier in the meeting. So I think I actually answered the first question, which was about the ramps and whether there will be a replacement ramp before 2026. The short answer to that is no. So if you have a follow-up question or another question of clarification, please feel free to put that in the chat. And I should say that anyone who asked a question and that we answer here, if you do have a follow-up question, you can use the chat the same way, and we'll do our best to track what the follow-up question is. I want to just write follow-up. If you don't mind helping us out, that would be great. So we'll know that it relates to a question that's been asked. So the second question we got was some confusion about the old Cherry Street and new Cherry Street and what the extent of the new alignment is. So I wonder if we could flip back quickly to slide 14 so that I can just speak to that visual for a second. Great. So you can see here that this visual, by the way, is what things will look like in 2024 when we're complete with this phase of construction. So you can see the park that is wraps around the new mouth of the Don River, just north of the Polson Slip there. And then you can see the new alignment of Cherry Street, which I'll speak to you in a moment. You can see the full extension, the kilometer-long extension of the Don River that empties out into the Polson Slip, and also empties south through the Don Greenway into the ship channel. And you can see the parks and wetlands that line that New River Valley. So New Cherry Street starts at Lake Shore, just west of existing Cherry Street. That makes a more direct link to Cherry Street north of Lake Shore Boulevard. And it reconnects to the existing Cherry Street between Commissioners and Polson. So you can see it does a little jog. There's the Cherry South Bridge over the New River Valley. And then after that jog slightly east, it connects in with the existing Cherry Street, which where you've got the Basco Bridge that you'd be used to using to cross the ship channel. So hopefully that answers the question. And I agree it can be confusing. How would the City of Toronto, this is the next question, by the way, how would the City of Toronto's proposed digital infrastructure plan inform future work on the Portlands? That's a really good question. And unfortunately, I don't have the right team on this call. I've got the team that really is doing the construction work that we have going on. And that's a big picture question. So I'm going to take that question back, and we'll commit to answering that in the summary from this meeting, if that's all right, with my apologies. The next question, is there any consideration for future LRT along Lake Shore East? I don't know, Don, if you want to quickly speak to the planning that informed these decisions. The short answer is no, there are no plans for an LRT along Lake Shore Boulevard, but Don, you might be able to give a quick background on the planning studies.
Sure. Yeah. So as part of the Gardiner EA, did look at multimodal options for transportation through the corridor. On top of that was the Portland South of the Eastern Transportation Master Plan. Does include recommendations for LRT, including a new LRT up Broadview Avenue that would tie into the future East Harbor development, and then ultimately with a new GO station at Broadview, and again tying in with East Harbor development. So there are definitely LRT plans in the large area. They're just not planned or included along Lake Shore Boulevard East.
Thanks, Don. And just to take a quick step back, we did get a follow-up question about the new ramps off the Gardiner and the timing for that. So that's what I was speaking to earlier. There is, you're right, there is a plan for a new ramp, and they will be just east of Cherry Street, to the Gardiner. The timing for construction of those right now is tentatively 2026, and the City of Toronto has some information on the project website, which we can link to in the chat, but no further information yet about the timing. They're still in design. So the latest timing is 2026 for construction of those. So to go to the next question. Next question was about the Keating Channel Pub and whether or not we're losing the Keating Channel Pub. Not due to this project. That area isn't being affected. So if the Keating Channel Pub wants to stay, they can stay. The next question is, I think, probably in response to the drone video that Julius was narrating, talking about all of the excavation on the Portland Flood Protection Project. And the question is, what do you do with all that dirt? I'm happy to answer it. Or Julius, would you like to give a quick answer about what happens with all the dirt we're excavating?
We primarily reuse it. There's about 10% of it hauled away for disposal because of high contamination levels. Generally, though, we treat the soil with microbes that consume hydrocarbons and bring them up to environmental standards and then reuse them across the site.
thanks. The next question, excuse my scrolling. So the next question is about the bike detours. And the question is, what happens when my 9-year-old nephew wants to bike to the waterfront from the beach, rides next to dump trucks? So it is true that these detours are through an area that does have truck traffic, which is the reason why we need to have the proper physical separation. And I saw a question in the chat much further down, not at the top of the queue, about whether Waterfront Toronto is committing to a safe detour route on October 31st. We are committing to have the concrete curbs and barriers securely in place so that people who are riding next to the more industrial traffic are going to feel safe. And I don't know if there's a follow-up to that question, but feel free to that. The next question is, there has been nothing but disruption getting eastbound. Closing 2 lanes does not make sense. Transport trucks are going through my neighborhood constantly with these closures. You've closed the main arteries for people in the East End to get home. How can Eastern support transport trucks all the time? So I don't know, John, if you're able to speak a little bit to how the traffic management plan addresses some of this, or some of the decisions that were driven by the traffic study, or Rudy?
Sure, I can jump in, Mira. It's
Sure.
John McKee here. The traffic management plan, it's a live document, and we are taking information as it becomes available to adjust what we're doing. That being said, there has been a lot of disruption, particularly over the last 5 weekends, where not only did we remove the Logan off-ramps, but we actually physically closed Lake Shore Boulevard. The good news is that part of it is behind us. Going forward, we're going to maintain traffic flow to 2 lanes eastbound, 1 westbound on Lake Shore Boulevard. So that will be the main east-west artery. Other things that we've looked at is we've reevaluated the traffic signal timing. As many as 70 different signals throughout the area to try to optimize traffic flow, and we continue to do that. And we're working with the City of Toronto to get traffic agents at the various intersections along Lake Shore to help control the traffic. So it is a live document. We are taking feedback and considering it seriously and doing what we can.
Thanks, John. The next question is whether there's any alternative to using paid duty officers for some of the traffic management, traffic control that's going on. John, did you want to take that question as well?
Yeah, well, we have taken a look at different options to the paid duty officers. We are using the City of Toronto traffic agents. 2 particular intersections which have been painful, I guess, is the Lake Shore and Jarvis, with the Gardiner on-ramp, and also the Lake Shore and York, which would be the off-ramp coming from the Gardiner. We think that some of the issues at Lake Shore and York are related to some of the construction work being done by the City of Jarvis, which should be wrapping up within the next week. So we're looking to see improvements there, but we are using City of Toronto traffic agents as well.
Thanks, John. The next question is about signage. And the question is, now that the multi-use trail and bridge along Lake Shore are open until the end of October and not closed on weekends, when can we expect this on a sign so that that's clear for people? I don't think they have to continue to use the detours right now. We are going to cover the signs that are there now to avoid confusion while we wait for the installation of the updated signs with the maps for the next phase of work, just so that we're not sending the wrong message to people who are looking to use that trail. Next question. Will the cycle track on Salter and Villiers be kept in good shape? Last week it was rough, very dirty, and not particularly fun to bicycle on. So as I mentioned, there is a fair amount of maintenance going on, but still we understand that there is mud, there is water on some of these trails. We have some plans to address some of the mud and ponding that's going on, and we will continue to walk the detours as we have been doing to make sure that we understand the condition and we know where we need to address some of this. We have a little bit of time now over the next couple of weeks. So,
Mara,
yeah.
So I could add on Villiers.
Yes.
On Villiers, we're waiting for the installation of the concrete curb, as I also wrote it last week as well, and the barrels had encroached slightly. Once we've got the concrete curbs installed, that should greatly improve the separation on Villiers and provide a wider pathway. So I think that will be a big step forward as well. And that's should be happening. We are waiting for delivery of the curbs, but that's going to start October 18th. So they'll be in place. They'll be in place before we do the closure on Lake Shore
Thanks,
for
John.
the detour.
So the next question, I think it is long, so we're going to try to unpack it a little bit. So the question is, can anyone acknowledge the traffic increase to every single road going west? Eastern Avenue is much worse. Lake Shore is a joke because everyone only accesses to the Gardiner westbound at Jarvis. Is there any plan to create advanced greens, maybe not having one lane closed at every road? Even going east, the Jarvis ramp is the only available exit, so Jarvis North has construction. So we addressed the construction that's happening north of Lake Shore on Jarvis, and hopefully that helps to address that concern of yours. And then the end of the comment is that everything is happening at the same time, which I also spoke to a little bit, and completely appreciate the frustration of that, of those overlapping closures. So there are a couple of questions in here, and some of them I think we need to take to the team. So I mentioned in my presentation as part of the frequently asked questions that the eastbound Jarvis on-ramp from Lake Shore is being kept closed for the project, so because of the benefits shown from the modeling. The closures on westbound Lake Shore at Jarvis should be resolved before we start our work. I think that addresses everything. I think what I'll do is take this one away and make sure that we've covered off all of your comments item by item. You also asked about Eastern Avenue, and we've been looking at that. As I mentioned, there was some parking removed on Eastern, as well as looking at optimizing traffic signals. So we'll give a more comprehensive answer and make sure that we follow up in the meeting summary, stuff that wasn't touched. Which barrels, next question, will be replaced on commissioners? For this one, John likely has the answer, and he can give it now, but I also think that it might be helpful for us to show a plan in the meeting summary as part of the answer to this question. I don't know, John, if you want to give a quick answer now, and then we'll commit to that visual later.
Yeah, where it is, we are also waiting for some concrete curbs on commissioners. I mean, it's hard to give without showing graphically without the plan. But between Salter and I guess it's Logan, there is going to be concrete curbs going as well. Maybe it's Bouchette. Do you want to put the plan up now, or do we want to pass that later? We can pass it later.
I think given that we don't have a ton of time, we do have the answer to this question, not dodging it. I think it would be more helpful to show on the plan exactly where we're planning to have curbs. So why don't we do that? And then if there's a follow-up question, we'd be happy to correspond over email or whatever works best for you. It's hard to speak to it without the visual. The next question is, can you comment on the plans for the rail spur on Lake Shore? What is the economic rationale for keeping it? That is a question that I don't have the answer to. Christian, do you by any chance have any update around plans relating to that rail spur on Lake Shore?
So the transportation services are in the process of studying, are undertaking a rail study, which is pretty well near completion, and it's part of the broader work that they're doing for the Broadview extension as well. but they are looking into it, and there are some interested parties still related to it that we need to touch base with, but it's being looked at by the city, and hopefully that there will be like a determination sometime closer to the end of the year, or even into early 2022. So it is under study right now.
Thanks, Christian. Hopefully that answers your question as best as we can at this time. So the next question is about the utility bridge crossing the Don River. And the question is, will it finally be removed? Ishan, do you want to quickly answer that?
Sure, Mira. So the utility bridge is basically, we are moving all the utilities currently on the utility bridge further north, not too north, just north of where they are right now, and the utilities including the gas main, the Toronto Hydro duct banks, the water main, and all the other utilities will be shifted over to the new utility corridor. That's what we call it. I hope that answers the question, Mira.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
So the next question, what are the timelines on the upgraded safety cycling features for the full length of the detours? And the second part of the question, why were they not in place in advance of these detours being put in place? On the timelines, I'll ask John to just confirm what our timeline is. I believe everything other than the curbs, those concrete curbs that we're waiting on, is in place. Is that right, John?
That's correct. So what we need to do is the concrete curb providing us the physical separation on the north side and south side of Villiers. As I said earlier, we're expecting delivery of those on October 18th. So they'll be in place before the end of October when we fully close Lake Shore and open the detour. So they will be in place before when the detour is fully reopened again. They weren't installed in advance. Simply we were waiting for a delivery of the barriers themselves.
Thanks. And so the interim solution with the delay of those concrete curbs as barriers was to put the barrels separated by the K-bars to create that delineation and the physical separation there as an interim measure while we waited for the materials. There was also some slight delay, though, in the first weekend with some of the pavement markings in addition to the barriers. That was a weather-related delay, as I understand it. However, we understand that those detours are significant and that they need to be comfortable and safe for people if we're going to close a major connection. So we're moving forward with that, and we hear the feedback. So the next question is, how many users of the trail ramps have been disrupted? I'm not sure that that's an easily answerable question. We can take that away and ask our traffic consultant to look at that, but that's a tricky question. Next question, what are the designated truck routes from Lake Shore eastbound from Cherry Street to Leslie Street? Designated truck routes from Lake Shore eastbound. So we did have a detour. I don't know if we're able to flip back to show the detour routes. I mean, right now we're talking about, just to be clear, moving forward with no full closure of Lake Shore Boulevard, right? So there will be east-west movement along Lake Shore Boulevard. So actually it's not relevant anymore because you could just take Lake Shore as before. There would be no change. I'm not sure if that actually answers the question or not. Feel free to follow up in the chat. Maybe I misunderstood your question. Next question, why did it take weeks in order to station traffic control at Jarvis? There was meant to be traffic control at Jarvis. I'm not sure that there's anyone on the line who could answer the question about the timing for that. We've seen now that there are a number of agents at that location and that it's being prioritized. In terms of why there weren't as many agents now in the first weeks, I couldn't say. The next question is, we need advanced greens for the throws of people driving on Eastern to Jarvis. Same going north at Broadview and Eastern. So we will review that feedback with the team. I think it was mentioned already that the traffic management plan is a live document. So if there are adjustments that can be made, that need to be made, the team will make those recommendations. So thank you for your comment on that. We've also received other feedback about areas that are causing some difficulty for people. So the next question, I was going east on Eastern on 5:15 Saturday. The left turn traffic at Logan was backed up significantly. Can you activate the existing left turn signal to work all the time? What I would say is this may not be needed if now that the weekend closures for the ramp removal are done. However, we have to monitor these things when construction resumes on Lake Shore Boulevard East. And just like with the last question, that's something that our traffic consultants, along with the City of Toronto, would look at. And if there's a recommendation to make a change, they can certainly do that. And thanks for that comment and the feedback on that intersection. I just want to take a pause to note that we are at 3:30. I'm going to try and get through a couple more questions. I am conscious of the fact that we've already asked a lot of everyone's time. And that we likely are not going to get through all of the questions that we've got here. But as I mentioned, anything that we don't get to now will be answered in the meeting summary. And we can also follow up directly with people via email if there's something that you'd like to have a bit of a back and forth on with us. So the next question is, do we have GPS data from delivery vehicles indicating true delays? I'm not sure that we have anyone on the line that can speak to that. I think the answer is no, but we'll confirm with the project team what information we do have. Next question. There's a great opportunity to replace the Lake Shore Bridge right now. Please comment on plans for replacement of this bridge. Will the general grade of Lake Shore also be elevated to address flooding risks? Simon, are you on the line? Did you want to speak to this? Rashawn?
Mira, I can speak to this one. So the elevations of the bridge, right now we are not raising the elevations of the bridge, but it is right now as it's standing, it's above the 100 level flow levels. So the soffit elevation will be more than what it is right now, but the elevation, the final top elevation of the bridge is not raised because it needs to match with the geometry of the road on the west and the east side of the bridge. And I can't speak to the replacement of the bridge component. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you. And we can flesh out that answer as well when we put the project summary together, but I hope that begins to answer your question. Next question is about the timing for reopening the eastbound Jarvis ramp. This is closed, as we mentioned, to allow more eastbound through traffic and to reconfigure the Jarvis on ramp for better traffic flow. We understand that there's a lot of congestion in that area. It is closed until this work is completed, and the City of Toronto is reviewing the opening after this work is complete. So that would be in 2024. The next question, and then I think we might have to end, is how far did the mailers go? I mentioned earlier that we mailed notices in advance of that first weekend of work before Labor Day weekend. So the northern boundary for that mailing was Gerrard, eastern boundary was Victoria Park, southern boundary was the lake, and the western boundary was Jarvis Street. I think we do have to stop, and I would like to keep going because I see we have a number of questions. So what I'll reiterate here is that we understand there are a lot of questions. It's understandable that there's some confusion. This is a big project, and there's a lot of moving parts, and there are a lot of closures nearby related to other work, as I mentioned. So we'll continue to answer questions. Hopefully, if you're here in this meeting, you now have a better sense of how to reach us, how to email us, tweet at us, call us, whatever is most comfortable for you. Mail us a letter, and we will be happy to address your questions and also take your concerns and feedback back to the broader group that's examining how we can continue to better keep people moving to the area and address the impacts that people are feeling from the work that's going on here. So with that, I want to thank the project team, thanks to our presenters, and final apology to those whose questions didn't get answered during this session. Thanks very much.